Welcome back to the channel. Today what I'm going to be talking about is Lee Haney, 8-time Mr. Olympia, and the way he won those titles. Basically because he was the best. There's no other way to even explain it. Lee Haney was probably one of the most popular Mr. Olympias there were, and also a family type man and a religious type man at the same time. And he managed to do all this and still maintain those title wins. I've never heard any kind of negativity around Lee Haney, but he always had a kind of a small amount of arrogance to him, which I think is needed whenever you are trying to win those particular titles. You got to have a little bit of confidence in yourself that you are able to beat anybody that's placed in front of you. And the thing about it is Lee Haney was an advocate of not lifting real heavy weights either. His motto was stimulate, do not annihilate. And that was his motto. And he was around about 245 pounds, a real good size Mr. Olympia. Today's Mr. Olympias have gone into excess of around 260, 270, upwards of that range. But at the same time, they don't have that same amount of aesthetics as Lee Haney had. Now, Lee Haney was back in the old school era. He had pretty much like even Arnold. He didn't have the biggest legs in the world, but he had decent legs. His legs was a little bit better than Arnold's legs was. And his calves was a little bit off, and people kind of digged him on his bicep. But yet and still, he had a real nice physique, and where he got a lot of his points from was his back. His back was, he had one of those kind of short torsos, which gave the illusion of his back being incredibly wide. And that right there normally annihilated anybody once he turned around. And his back had a great amount of detail in it. And if you want to see one of the best at what they do, look up Lee Haney, and you'll definitely not be disappointed with the guy. If you sit up and watch his videos, his motivational speakings and stuff like that, the guy is very well put together. Not only in a physical standpoint, also in a knowledgeable standpoint. And Lee Haney really never did any kind of powerlifting type movements. He did all bodybuilding movements. And he would always tell you, I'm not a powerlifter, I'm a bodybuilder. And that's the way he kept it. And it worked. And it worked well. Dorian Yates, toward the end of his reign, started closing in on him. But who knows whether or not Dorian Yates would have been able to unseat Lee Haney. Everything is theory. That didn't actually happen. Lee Haney actually, like I said, he actually took out Dorian Yates every time they competed against each other. But Dorian Yates was every year was climbing to get that title. But you take bodybuilders like Dorian Yates, which I will talk about in another segment, and take a type of bodybuilder like Lee Haney, and the longevity of the two, is quite different. Because if you look at Ronnie Coleman was a mass monster, man. He was a monster, and he was a monster in lifting those weights. But at the same time, those weights actually tore his body up. The same thing with Dorian Yates. Dorian Yates was a heavy lifting Mr. Olympia, and the heavyweights tore his body up. And you look at bodybuilders like Lee Haney, even Phil Heath. These are bodybuilders that really didn't lift real heavy weights, and they are maintaining their bodies without a whole lot of injury. So even Dexter Jackson, the same way, he won his Mr. Olympia, and he never did advocate lifting real heavy weights either. So let's dispel that myth that it takes excessive poundages to build decent physiques and to be able to win the Mr. Olympia with that. Because I've given you several Mr. Olympias that has won the Mr. Olympia title without the excessive weights. So if you want longevity in weightlifting, you know, I always stay with light to moderate weights, and you can't go wrong. But Lee Haney was a Mr. Olympia of Mr. Olympias, because even with his titles and all of his sponsorships, the guy managed to keep his family together, and he managed to keep that family life going, which is quite hard when it comes down to that type of success, and with all the seminars and stuff you would have to go to and things of that nature. The guy managed to keep himself together, and at the same time keep his body together. Lee Haney didn't leave out with his body falling apart or his detail not being there. He left out the way you're supposed to leave out, looking just as good as you did, you know, the previous year. So that's what I want to talk to y'all about. Look up Lee Haney, and you can't go wrong with that. And thanks for watching. And if you hadn't subscribed, subscribe to the channel, and I'll be talking to you later.